Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Before we start this episode, I just wanted to apologize actually for something. When we were recording this episode, we were having some connection issues with the internet, and so I debated on re-recording it, but I just loved the content that we covered with Savannah, and so I wanted to get this audio out to you. So there's going to be a couple of parts where her audio is going to clip out a little bit. And so what I did was, on the video version of this episode, I put subtitles, which should take care of some of the issues. There might be parts that get clipped, but it's just such an incredible episode, so I know you're going to love it anyways. So back to the show. Enjoy.
That's when I was like, I have to make a serious change in my life because this is not healthy. Like, I can't just be waking up, going to school, practicing, going home. That's not, I would rather be a worse pianist and have a better outside life and be okay with it than be one of the best pianists in the world and have no friends. Like, that, it was so lonely. And especially for piano, I wasn't doing any ensemble work. I wasn't doing any, because I was so obsessed with getting better. So I kind of allowed myself to just breathe of like what I was going through, and I appreciated that, but also I feel like I could have been more productive. I was like, you know what, Savannah, you need to pick yourself up. It's just an injury. So many people get injured. And so that's when I started to be like, okay, how can I better grab away from the piano? So there's always some give and take. It's like, do I take the day off and risk whatever I worked on the day before not being 100% there, or do I take the day off and then I have fun, but then I have to work extra hard the next day? And I think it's just like training your brain that it doesn't have to be practice room dependent. Continue to get better. But then I also started like researching pieces that I had never even heard of, composers I hadn't even heard of, just like appreciating music as a whole, because there's so much music outside of piano.
All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today I'm really excited to talk to our guest because of a few things. First off, we go to the same school, and she's our first college student guest on our program, but also she's our first non-brass musician that I've interviewed. So I'm really excited to hear her story about her injury and how she was able to navigate it and all things related to that. So without further ado, Savannah Jones, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be talking about this. I'm always up to talk about my injuries.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that Savannah has a platform that she has shared about her own injury. I think last I saw on Instagram, you have 54,000 followers?
Yeah.
Sav plays piano, right?
Yes.
So definitely go check her account out. She talks about her practice routines and her experience with injury, and a lot of other piano related things that I don't understand, but I think are really, really cool all the same, right? So first off, I always just like to start by just having people share their story about their injury. And I know you were telling me that you've experienced 2 injuries within the last little while. And so if you want to just go ahead and kind of share that story, and not only like what happened, but how you were able to get through it physically and also musically and mentally even.
Yeah, for sure. So I have always had kind of a problem with injuries. I was never really trained professionally. Technique was never a focus. And so I have always just developed bad technique habits when it comes to playing. And by the time I got to my master's, it was really a problem. And I was preparing for a competition. This was October of last year. I was preparing for a competition. I was drilling this one section. I was not practicing smart, and I knew that. But in my head, it was just keep doing it until you get it like perfect, until you can't play it wrong. Big octave section of Chopin Polonaise Opus 61, for those of you who are familiar with that piece. And I knew that I had done something to my right hand finger, my pinky, but it didn't hurt that bad. I just thought it was kind of overuse injury. I think I'd practiced probably 7 hours that day, which I do not do
Wow.
it because I was not smart. But anyway, so the next morning I woke up, I had a week before my competition, and I knew I had injured my finger. But again, I just thought it was overused. Maybe I strained it. Maybe I didn't really think that much of it because when I started playing, it would stop hurting because I would stop focusing on the pain. I think the adrenaline was a constant hurt kind of outside of piano, so I wasn't too concerned about it. I competed that Saturday, went great. And then the Monday following the Saturday of my competition, I woke up and my this joint right here was like blue, and I was like,
Wow.
awesome. So I really did something to it. I immediately went to the doctor and we did a X-ray, and the X-ray showed a little tiny white mark in the X-ray, and the doctor's like, this could be a lot of things, but seeing your bruising, I think you partially tore a ligament, so that's where all the bruising's coming from. He said, I wouldn't be surprised if that's a bone fragment right there in your finger, from the ligament being partially torn and all the trauma that's going on there. He's like, we can't be 100% sure unless you want to get like an MRI, but the recovery will be the same. So the problem was is that I had a piano festival that I was performing at in Miami about a month and a half after that. And I was like, I can't rest. Like, I don't just get to take a break. And so he said, take a week off. You'll be fine in a week. Just let this ligament mostly heal. I don't think the doctor truly understood how much piano I was practicing at the level. Hard to convey that to doctors. Because when you say you play
It
piano,
is.
it's hot for them. So I took a week. I did practice for a week, and it was still in so much pain. So I went to my second different doctor. I went to a hand specialist this time. The first time was just like the closest practice to. But the second time I went to a surgeon, because I thought I could go to serious because, and I walked into that doctor and he looked at my X-ray. He didn't even look at my hand, and he said, "I'm just gonna give you a steroid shot and you'll be fine." And didn't even like. And he stuck me with a steroid shot in that joint, which I think you guys have had steroid shots in your fingers. They hurt so bad. And I felt like it didn't really help after a couple days. Still wasn't helping at all. I was like, doctors are not taking it seriously, and I'm not getting better for January when I have to perform. So I went to my third doctor. I went to a different hand doctor, and I like sat him down. I'm like, hey, I'm a classically trained, basically professional musician, and I have important performances coming up, and I need this fix. I need you to take me seriously. He was the first one that was like, yes, we will take you seriously. And he referred me to this physical therapist, a hand physical therapist, finally. And I went to him, and he was amazing. And that's when I actually started doing exercise to address the partial torn ligament and all the inflammation that was going on in my finger. And I would go to physical therapy 2 days a week for 3-4 weeks. And he was able to get where I was able to play without too much pain. The ideal situation would have been resting for 3 months, but I could do that. And some people would have said, you should have rested, like, set yourself up for another injury. But I didn't want to lose out on this opportunity in Miami, and I just didn't want to rest for 3 months. I don't know, I think it's hard for us musicians to not do what we're supposed to do. And also with my hand injury, I wasn't able to go to the gym. I wasn't able to climb. A lot. It wasn't just piano. So anyways, I went to physical therapy. I went to Miami, but I ended up still only playing with my left hand. There are quite a few pieces in the piano repertoire for left hand only. So I was able to play short little pieces with my right hand without too much pain, but I just decided on quickly learning this like 7-minute left hand and performing that, and it went really well. And it was good for me to be challenged, to learn and memorize a half a festival, because I kept putting off learning until the festival because I said, I'll be better. And I was not getting better as fast as I wanted. So still was working with physical therapy, but my finger was mostly fine. I slowly worked myself up, like 30 minutes a day, an hour a day. Probably by the time mid-February, I was practicing 4 to 5 hours a day. like my comfortable time practice that I liked every day. That's where I feel like I can be the most productive, but also not overwork myself. So injury, fine, everything's great. And then in June, I was going on vacation with my whole family. My brother-in-law, we were at the airport. It was like 5 a.m. We had a weird layover, and he gave me a fist bump, but it was more like tired, like, hey, dude, and just kind of slugged it and hit me as hard as he did. But his fist perfectly hit each other where the same joint that was injured before just got re-injured, and it tore the ligament.
Oh, man.
And there was so much swelling of fluid, and it was probably 10 times worse than my first injury. And
Yikes.
it was like, okay, I'm going to anyway for 2 weeks. So I'm back after 2 weeks of resting, fine. And I came back and I couldn't even like touch a piano without like immense burning pain. And I was like, this is not okay. I quickly went and got an MRI this time because I was like, this was the worst. So I went and got an MRI, showed the torn ligament, and also just so much swelling fluid that had kind of built up there. I forgot to mention the first injury. I also had tendonitis, along with so many things.
Why not, right?
Yeah, just add that. The tendonitis the first time, as I was practicing on an injured finger, and so my tendon was, and I developed tendonitis while practicing.
Right.
Anyways, now to the second injury again. So I just texted my therapist. He was such a bro, and I just texted him. I was like, hey, I got injured again. I don't think I can get another doctor's referral. Like, can you fit me in? And he said, absolutely. This time the injury was so bad that it needed to be stabilized, but I had another performance opportunity in 3 weeks in Italy. And I was like, I'm not missing out on that.
Right.
There's not very get to perform this many times across the world. Like, I want to be able to experience all this, not just. So I went to physical therapist. He custom made me a brace where it would stabilize the joint, but I would be able to play certain things as long as I didn't have to stretch. So for pianist watching, I was able to practice my Bach prelude and fugue because everything was kind of within a 5 to 7 finger pattern.
Bach's got small hands is what I've heard.
That wouldn't surprise me because a lot of it, you don't have to have big reasons. So I was able to still practice my Bach, but I've pulled out some more left hand rep, and I went to physical therapy this time like 3 times a week for a couple weeks leading up to Italy. And then it still was really, really painful. It was getting better mobility wise, but it just wasn't wanting. So I went to the previous doctor that referred me to that physical therapist, and he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put a steroid shot in your tendon because it will help with inflammation of your whole finger. That was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced because they go in. I've had a couple steroid shots from other injuries before, but normally it's just in the general area. This one, he put it in like the palm of my hand of the tendon below my joint, and he had to find the tendon and then inject the steroid medicine. It felt like my hand was on fire. However, 24 hours after, it helped so much. So I'm glad I did that. I would never, ever, ever want. So then I went to Italy. I was able to perform my Bach, worked on like my left piece and all that stuff. Coming back from Italy, I knew that I'd made the mistake of playing on this injury. I should have break, but again, I don't want to play this incredible opportunity. So I risked it. And coming back from Italy, I took a month off because I had kind of a break before going back to school. And currently, my finger, it feels fine. I can play, but it has severe mobility issues where I can play everything that I need to, but when I make a fist, my finger doesn't want to curl anymore because of all the
interesting
that is in my joint. So thankfully, it doesn't affect piano anymore. The biggest problem has been like stamina, building up the strength and be able to play for 4 to 5 hours. And I was able to get to that point probably around September September or October. But with lots of physical therapy and doctor appointments, um, when I was injured the first time, when I went to Miami, I was actually so glad this happened. One of the director of the festival, and she teaches and helps injured pianists. And she's like, I will train you. We will get through this injury. So the entire time I've been injured this past year, I've also been working on technique with a separate professor than my actual professor here at BYU. And it's been incredible. So not only have I been going to like doctor appointments and physical therapy shots and braces and stuff, I've also been training on how to correct my technique so that I'll never have it, which has been nice. Because before, I feel like I was always playing, and then I finally got injured. And the second injury was a freak out. But
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is just fixing my technique overall, because that was the root of the problems of my injuries.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I think I see a lot. This is one of the things I love about doing this show is that I see a lot of parallels with mine to the people I have on the show, my injury. And one of those is I think when I first got hurt, it was because I was using poor technique, right? And I think that's how, when it's not a traumatic injury, that's usually the reason why it happens, is because of poor technique, right? If not all the time. I don't know if there would be any other situation where that wouldn't be the case, but one of the things that helped me, and I'm sure that helped you during the time that you had to take off, and also, as you're coming back, was the kind of the sense of hope, and the for me, it was almost like an excitement to knowing that when I came back, I was going to be using the right technique that would prevent that from happening again. That I was ultimately going to get better than I was before my injury. And so I don't know, like, if that was the case with you.
Oh, 100%. I always say that I'm kind of glad I got injured the first time. The second time, no. But the first time got me introduced.
Right.
Yeah, the first time got me introduced to my technique professor. And if I had been injured right before that festival, right before playing Miami, I would have still been practicing with bad technique. I would have still had probably more injuries or building up potential. And so being able to work with a professor that deals directly, it's called the Taubman approach. For any that are out there, it's an incredible technique approach to avoid injury. Works directly with Taubman. And so I'm glad I got injured the first time in a way, because I was able to fix my technique perfectly, and my playing has improved so much the last year. But it was definitely frustrating taking off those months, like having to deal with rude doctors that don't understand what's going on.
Right.
And like it was hard to perform in Miami and Italy. Both of those performances weren't at my best, but they should have been. Like I was prepared to be at my best during those two performances, and it was hard because I wasn't, because of those injuries. But also it was kind of nice because I played my master's, and it was almost like I had I was able to play injured. I competed on basically a broken finger. I'm not injured anymore, and I've had all the tools in my arsenal. Like, this should be a mistake. Now, when you're performing, that mindset kind of went away, and I freaked out a little bit. But going into it, I'm glad that all those things happened, because my technique became so much easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad your recital went well. So when you were going in that rest period, there's a lot of people who are even listening to this who are in that time of their injury recovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what did you do to keep yourself busy? I mean, because you say you're practicing 7 hours a day, so there's all of a sudden this 7-hour gap, this hole in your day, right? And so what did you do to kind of fill that hole, but then also from a just, I guess, a life standpoint, but then also a musical standpoint?
Yeah. I would love to say that I was super productive, immediately started thinking positively and started studying a bunch of other subjects. Honestly, like the first couple weeks, I was addicted to like Netflix and watching movies, distracting myself because I was so incredibly like broken. Because piano for me was like everything. And also like I loved going to the gym. I loved weightlifting. I loved just it was like my lifestyle, and I felt like my lifestyle just was gone. And I had no desire to like study piano rep or listen to a bunch of different pieces I've never listened to or start studying composers I've never heard of because I'm like, what's the point if I can't even play? Um,
Right.
so I kind of allowed myself to just grieve of like what I was going through. And I appreciated that, but also I feel like I could have been more productive. But so a lot of people when they come out of injury feel positive and I'm smiling and I got to have all this time to meditate, become who I really am. No, I did not do that. I I would go to my classes, I would go back home, watch movies. I binged Netflix like crazy. And I was like, you know what, Savannah, you pick yourself up. It's just an injury. So many people get injured. And so that's when I started to be like, okay, how can I better craft away from the piano? And there are so many things. I was like, I have been so dumb by being, but also I feel like I needed it.
No, that's so true.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just real quick, the grieving process, that's something that I didn't give myself credit for at first. In fact, I don't think I needed help to get through that process because I didn't want to go through it. You know, it was
Yeah.
kind of like throw it back in the closet and try and find something else to do. So I think we react to it in different ways. But I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I was just saying that like after I finally went through that lazy grief, life is over, period. The pity
Yeah.
me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pull out these left hand pieces because this is the perfect opportunity to learn them because I only have my left hand operational right now. I'm going to work on my left hand scales because they suck. They sucked before, and now I have the opportunity to fix my left hand scales. I can work on the left hand section of my pieces that struggle with memory. I can memorize the left hand of my like 10-minute Schubert sonata by itself. I actually did that at one point. I was like, wow, I didn't know I could memorize one hand of a whole piece. But then I also started like researching pieces that I had never even heard of, composers I hadn't even heard of, just like appreciating music as a whole because there's so much music outside of piano. I feel like especially pianists because we don't get a ton of ensemble work unless you're there. We are very much like lone, sit in a practice room. We're kind of egotistical sometimes. Do everything by ourselves, and so I was or more like chamber music, symphony, all that. So just seeing that there's more music outside of my own practice was,
Yeah.
but it took me a minute to get there.
No, I appreciate you saying that because I think there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who are in that kind of like that grieving phase and probably being pretty hard on themselves for being in there. For a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, because they want to be where they used to be, right? They want to be in the practice around or, gigging or whatever. And they can't, right? And then also they are, like you said, they just don't see the relevance, I guess, anymore of doing the other things when the primary thing that they were used to doing with music is gone, right? And so I appreciate you saying those things and just being super, I guess, upfront with that because I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to that. And then just the principle of curiosity. I think I've talked about that a lot on the show already, and I think that's a skill that we as musicians tend to not develop because, especially in our stage of development, right, in the school, the college, the collegiate realm, right, we're very one-track minded of like, okay, this is what, and maybe it's just kind of like a culture thing because there's only so much time in the day. We don't have time to necessarily go on down all these rabbit holes, but I think there's a real importance and a real blessing and benefit that comes from the injury that gives us the opportunity to be more curious, right, about the other parts of our musicianship or the other parts of our life, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, and then you at the point of your injury, you had already had your Instagram and your platform going for a
Yeah.
while, right? And
Yes.
so how did that influence your recovery and your progress going through it?
Well, at first, during the first injury, I did not want to announce it. I did not want to say that I was injured because I didn't want to look like a pick me musician that's like, oh, I got injured. Everyone feel bad for me. I didn't want to look like someone that's like, look at me. I want attention. I was injured. And I also didn't want to look like someone that had bad technique. I was very ashamed of it. But I didn't have the tools at that time before I met my professor to fix it. And I feel like I have so many incredible friends on Instagram that like are at Juilliard and conservatories and just like these big name schools. And I almost have what's it called? What's that one phrase where you feel like you're faking it, like you don't
No,
deserve
imposter syndrome.
it. Yeah, I feel like having the Instagram that I definitely have major imposter syndrome because I don't want people to look at me having a huge amount of following, not huge, but like I was not expecting to get up to 50,000 followers at all ever. And I don't want people to look at that like, oh, she has so many followers, she must be so good at the piano, and then she gets injured. Like, oh, she's actually bad, she's just faking it, you know? And so I was kind of nervous about it because I didn't want to admit that I had bad technique. I didn't want to show that I really was playing in a bad way that would have gotten me injured 10 times after that. But when I finally did post it, I realized that a lot of people came from my same boat and that they weren't professionally trained by university professors that would have taught them that. They weren't, or they also struggled with kind of this addiction to practicing where it's like, I have a competition, I'm going to practice until I drop type of thing. That's what I was doing. I was just drilling something mindlessly because I needed my hands to understand it. And so it was kind of refreshing to the first time when I announced it and like hearing everyone else's stories. Now the second time was even more embarrassing because I didn't want people to think that I was faking it because I got quite a few more followers after my first announcement.
Oh, interesting.
Um, because people saw that, and I didn't want people to think that I was trying to get more. They're like, "Oh, I got injured again. Everyone look at me." Like that was not what I wanted, and it also seemed like such a weird story that like I tore a ligament from a bump. Who, where, you know?
Yeah,
And I went to the point of even like on my Instagram story, I was like, "Guys, here are my MRI results. Like, I promise I'm not lying to you." And I doubt anyone was ever actually questioning the validity of that. I was
sure.
just kind of stressed about it because who gets injured the same finger within 6 months of each other and just keeps making up stories, you know? Like, that's not what I
Right.
wanted to seem like. Um, and I also had this pressure that I had to keep posting because everyone knows that in order to get a following on Instagram, you have to post a lot. And after both of my injuries, I kind of fell away from that and stagnant. And it's not like I'm not doing this for the followers at all, but I do want my videos to reach people. And when you stop posting, your videos fall out of rhythm. And so, like, your audience, your videos. And I love audience. And so I felt like this need to be like, everyone come practice with me the day after getting injured and then to show like my left hand result, my left hand. But really, what I was doing is I would practice, have a horrible time, go home, sit in bed. And I would film it and it would seem so perfect. And so I posted another routine a couple weeks after my injury. And it was after not posting for probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. And it was just like trying to get out of this rut because I felt like I needed to post. I had pressure because I have an audience watching me, which I didn't expect. I was like, I need to get back playing because I have this many people watching my videos. If I hadn't have, if I haven't, well, if I hadn't had my Instagram, I feel like I would have been less stressed during my injury because there's not a lot of eyes on me. But I would get messages daily that said, "Are you better yet? Like I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you." And they were all good spirited. I'm like, again, amazed that I have this community. But it would stress me out when I wasn't getting better. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't want to feel like a left-hand piece, or I felt like my content was getting boring because it was just all left-hand stuff, or like I wasn't practicing as many hours in a day, so it wasn't as flashy for my vlog because it was like I practiced 1 hour today. That's all I did. No one wants to watch that, in my opinion. Um, and so I don't know, the Instagram thing, but it was also a blessing. So the curse part was pressure, but it was also a great blessing because I met so many people that were also injured, and I've met so many like really close friends that I talk to basically daily on there that are all around the world that are musicians, and they were great people to talk to just kind of clear my head about some things. So I think that one of the best things you can do during an injury is just don't close yourself off. Make sure that you're still in your community of musicians, whether that's in your ensemble groups, your orchestra, your university, whatever you're in. Try and keep that open. Don't close yourself off because that's not going to help at all. Not even a little bit.
No, and that's so good that you mentioned that. I should have mentioned this before we got into this topic, but our school at Brigham Young University actually did an article and a video, I guess, about you, right? Because of your following that you have and how you've been able to use that for several different personal reasons, and then also to build that community, right? Do you want to maybe go into a little bit of why you started that in the first place, and then how that's, I guess you already talked about how it's affected you during your injury, and I guess positively and negatively, but
Yeah.
but how did that start?
So I was just so lonely. Pianists, we are very lonely creatures. And I think a lot of us like it, but then there's always a part where it's like, ugh, I just sat in a practice room by myself for 5 hours a day. Like when other majors at university, they can do homework together. They can go to study groups. It's like, oh, let's all get together at my house and do homework for 2 hours, go get dinner. And it's like, my homework has to be done alone. My homework is in a practice room by myself.
Right.
I don't unity practice session. I'm always jealous of other musicians that they get to go to choir, get to go to band, orchestra. And pianists, we do have those opportunities, but we search for them more, and there's less of them because an orchestra only needs one pianist, right? A group only needs one. Not like you're a violinist that has whole sections of first and seconds, not saying that that it's easier for them to get positions, but it's just harder for pianists to search those out. It's
Right.
kind of on unless you're a collaborative pianist, that's different. But
Sure.
it was in my undergrad. I felt like I was a crappy pianist. I was like, what's the point? There's so many people that are better than me. Like I have my friends at the university, but what's next? I didn't want to graduate university just being the native teacher that spent so many time and hours in the practice room doing their best, but then I wasn't winning competitions. I wasn't soloing with orchestras. I wasn't traveling across the world getting these opportunities. And so I was like, you know what? I want to perform in a space that doesn't make me nervous because I had major performance anxiety. The only time I'd get perform were for juries and recitals, and that was it. And I would get stressed out and I didn't enjoy it. I love this music so much and I want to perform it where I'm not nervous. So I'm going to start an Instagram where I can take as many takes as I want and I can post the best clip of myself playing because I have that control. And so I just started posting videos of my playing. I think this was in 2019. 2019 is when I started my Instagram. And for like the first year, I just had like a consistent 300 followers. But that was when I met some of my like best Instagram friends that they've been with me since 2019. And I had so much fun with it because I was just getting to post and other people were posting as well. Like a lot of pianists started posting during that time. And I got to be other pieces, other composers, and friends from across the country. And then it was 2021 is when I started posting more vlog style videos because I just love the influencer type videos. Like I'm one of those girlies that's like, I'm watching vlogs, I'm watching that kind of like interact. Oh, I don't want to say getting bored, but I was like, I'm just posting videos of my playing and not accessible to everyone. Because what if someone like wants to know about classical music, but they don't want to like listen to it, So I'm like, I
Sure.
want to be like a music content creator. I don't like to use the word influencer because I'm not trying to get people to buy stuff. But I was like, I want to start doing vlogs. I want people to see what it's like in my day because I don't get to see musician vlogs ever. It's always just like the girls that get a ton of money from brand deals and then they go run errands throughout the day. And those are the vlogs you see on TikTok. And I was like, I want to be a musician vlogger. And that also opened up the whole creative side of me, which I didn't know existed of like, I love editing. I love being creative with like the video side of it. And this way I was able to show my personality along with my playing. I think a lot of times it can be hard for musicians to like show who they are, especially on social media, because you just see their playing. And so I was able to do voice. I was able to do like come with me to practice or like trying to memorize a piece in one day and like sharing that process. And I found that a lot of people loved it because it was combining classical music, which can be seen as very pretentious almost, but then combining it with like the fun parts of like it's very interactive, it's very real. Like there's one day where I took like it was like a 3 hour nap and I was like, and I didn't practice. I went home and took a nap and now I'm gonna go practice. Like just seeing the real side of musicians. Um and it was fun because a lot of other people started blogging too. And I was like so in support of this. I've had people message me saying, like, hey, I want to start like an Instagram, like vlogging channel. Can I? I'm like, you do not have to ask my permission. I will follow you. I will watch the vlogs. Like, just because I was one of the first people to do it in short form content. Because I know there's a pianist, Tiffany, she's on YouTube and she's been vlogging, but those are much longer vlogs. And I wanted kind of short, like minute long ones. Um, Anyways, so I loved it. I loved just the creative side on it. And then the injury happened. And it also, I don't want this to sound in the wrong way, but it did add kind of a different level of my content because before everything's just hunky dory. Like I woke up, I went to school, I practiced, I taught, and I practiced some more. I had dinner, I went to bed. And the injury was able to add some depth where I never really had like I struggled with piano, like technically and, just being able to be at a good level, but like actual struggles with it. And I think that helped people realize that they're not alone in their injuries. I've gotten so many people saying, I got injured, I just broke my right arm, but I saw that you were playing a left hand piece. So I decided to sit down and just practice a couple measures of one. And I wasn't so depressed. I was like, oh, yay. And so I was able to
Beautiful.
see from these people that are going through the same thing. And they said because of my videos, they weren't like so sad about their injury that they realized they can get better. So I don't know. I love the whole Instagram thing. Plan on never stopping just because of the people. Like it's not the follower count, it's not the views, but it's just fun having this really small that I like get to talk to every single day.
No, that's awesome. And I think that was definitely put in place at the right time from what you told me for you to be able to use that kind of as a support system, right, for your injury. So that's really cool. Kind of changing gears just a little bit from that is well, not really, but like on one of your videos you mentioned the fact that Kobe Bryant is one of your heroes, right? And he's one of mine. I grew up playing basketball, and I've never been really a Lakers fan, but I've always been a Kobe Bryant fan. And I maybe lose some followers for that, for saying that. But anyway, Kobe Bryant was well known as a basketball player, but I think more than that was his work ethic, right? And I think they call it the mama mindset or mama mentality. I mean, the man like got up at 4 a.m. He was working out 2 hours before anyone, their alarms went off. And so one of the things that I am really passionate about is applying the mindset that athletes have to musicianship, and also just like to getting through it. Because as musicians, we're naturally pretty hard on ourselves. But I have noticed that there are some parts of some things that athletes can push them, some levels that athletes can push themselves to that musicians not necessarily can. And so I'm wondering if your perspective on that that mindset that Kobe had, and that you were trying to apply in your life. How did that change from pre-injury to post-injury?
Pre-injury, I'm also not a Lakers fan, thankfully. But I am actually obsessed with that. Like if I wasn't going to do piano performance, I was going to get a double degree in sports analytics and statistics, so that I wanted to be like an
Really?
NBA. I love watching basketball, and I'm kind of fascinated with just like professional athletes in general, how they do it. And I feel like a lot of musicians can take great qualities from
Definitely.
and like pre-musician, I don't know. I feel like not pre-musician, pre-injury, post-injury. I feel like this hasn't changed, but I feel like the context of it has a little bit, where it's like you have no excuse not to be getting better. You know, before it was, oh, I'm tired. Who cares if you're tired? Someone else is practicing, and if you have a competition, you also should be practicing. Um, oh, I want to be lazy tonight. Okay, well, that's not going to further your musician. That's not going to further your progress. And so I always wanted to be the hardest worker in the room, because I knew that I sometimes struggled level wise competing against certain pianists, but I never wanted anyone to question my work ethic and how hard I was willing
Right.
to at least try, because I've always been behind in the piano world. Most pianists start when they're 3 to 5. They've been performing their whole life. And I started professionally trained when I was 17. I've been playing since I was 8, but I was not introduced to this world until much later. And so I kind of used that mentality to, there's no excuses. There's no excuses. And then I got injured, and I was like, okay, there are excuses.
Sure.
And just thinking about it, the mama mentality is great. However, these athletes, they have chefs 24/7 to their exposure. They have professional doctors and trainers on staff whenever they want it. When they get injured, they get the full treatment. They have the fastest recoveries because they have all the fancy tech, all the fancy gear that is towards them. They are very privileged in a way where money can basically buy them a recovery as fast as humanly possible, right? um, but musicians, we don't have that. We still have to go home and cook, and like normal people too. It's not just a musician thing, but you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt sometimes. Be like, yes, mama mentality. Also, I need to make dinner. I don't just get to say, I'm going to practice all day and I'm going to skip my meals. That's not healthy. You can say mama mentality all you want, but you need to exercise your body so it's healthy. Like, you don't just get to say, I'm going to practice 8 hours, but then you are weak, right? Because that's not going to help you with stamina. You can always say mama mentality, but then you have to do your work. You have to like these people that are professional athletes that say mama mentality, that is their job, and a lot of us, we have school jobs and we have to teach, we have to work. So I think that what changed for me after the injury was, yes, I can always improve, and I can always keep getting better, and I shouldn't be lazy, and there's still that drive, but there's also the context of, but I also am a normal human being, and I have to go and I have to cook care of myself. And so if it comes between eating dinner and practicing, I'm going to eat dinner, right? If it comes between going to the gym and missing out on, like, instead of doing 5 hours of practicing, I'm doing 4, I'm probably going to choose the gym because I know that that will help my well-being. And then also, if I'm injured, I'm not going to pressure myself to get better faster because I'm just a normal human. I don't have like cryotherapy or like water massagers or all the fancy medical tech that is out there for people with millions of dollars, right? Um, can I get better studying my score? Yes. Can I listen to a bunch of interpretations? Can I do the work outside of the practice room? Yes. But also, I have to keep it realistic and not be so hard on myself when I decide to take time. Like, if I haven't seen my friend plays and I mentally just need a break, like, yes, mama mentality, but also I need to have a life outside of the practice room, and it just can't be everything, or you're going to lose friends, you're going to lose family. At the end of the day, what else do you have besides like your instrument? So
I think that's what we all figured out when we got injured, right? It's like we were spending so much time in the practice room, then once it was taken away, it's like, well, what is there to go to? You know, man, I think the last 2 to 3 minutes has been the worth, what's the phrase, like worth the price of admission,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because, you know, like I said, I grew up an athlete, right? And then I started being a musician, and I think athletes, like everything you said was gold there. They have much more at their disposal, including dealing with much bigger muscles, you know, much bigger muscles, meaning that the muscles that they're using are much larger and not dealing with the fine motor skills of a pianist, right?
Doctors they are trained to help athletes, even like non-athletic doctors when they go to school. Like, okay, these types of sports create these injuries with these muscles. I doubt that there are any med classes that talk about the tiny little ligament in that joint that I tore and like ways to fix that. It's probably like, okay, when you tear a little ligament in your finger, you rest. That's what you tell them. But if I'm into you and say, okay, I tore my rotator cuff, you know, like the doctor would be on plan, like, hey, this is what we're doing, and this and this and this and this and this. But there's not very many doctors that understand, and like athletes, they have that luxury that they can go into a doctor and, oh, I get it, sports, go you,
right.
You know,
right.
But oh, fun, you play the piano, cute. Like, no.
And then you get this weird look, like you broke your hand playing the piano. You know, for me, It was like, you can tear your leg playing the trumpet. The jokes are endless, you know. So I think a couple of other things I want to just hit on that you spoke about that I just love are, you know, the fact that you do have a life outside of the practice room. In fact, it's that life outside of the practice room that's going to make your life inside of the practice room much more effective, right? I think, you know, talking about the Mamba mentality, I would even say that Kobe would probably agree with us when we're talking about this, is when it becomes a question of like, if something outside of the practice room, or for him, the court, if it's going to recharge him, I'm sure he would say, I'm doing that rather than being in the gym. And that's what I've learned now, right? For me, is if it's going to recharge me in any way, right, in any part of my health, then I'm going to do it other than practice. But if it's me escaping, you know, that, you know, that work that needs to get done in the shed, right? Then that's the distinguishing factor, because, and that takes some serious honesty with ourselves, right? Some like brutal honesty to be able to determine, okay, what is my reasoning for wanting to do this? And I think it's a little easier to determine than we give it credit for. You know, sometimes we can get paralysis analysis doing that, but I really think that most of the time it's a little easier than we give it credit for to determine, okay, am I really just being lazy, or do I really need this? And I think our body does a really good job when we listen to let us know, no, you need to go eat dinner. You know, or you need that social interaction.
Oh, 100%. There have been so many times where in the beginning of my master's degree, I was determined to prove myself, because I felt like I was one of the weakest pianists in the program of my master's degree. And I said, I will do anything just so that I don't look like a mistake, that I don't look like that I was it, that people question, like, oh, how'd she get to the program? Not that anyone else's opinions matter, but I wanted to be substantial in my work. And so I lived in a practice room for hours and hours and hours, and I didn't have any friends. Like, I had just moved schools. I just moved from where my undergrad was to my master's, and my roommates and I didn't talk to each other. I did not put myself in like social positions to make friends. I had my cousin that was here in Provo, and I hung out with his friend group, but I didn't have my own friend group. And there became a point where I went through a breakup because I started dating someone in that friend group, and I realized I literally had not made any Provo friends of here at all, because I cared so much about piano. And then after that breakup, when I couldn't hang out with that friend group anymore, and I was like, oh, who am I going to hang out with? There was no one. like not even a single person that I was friends with. And so that's when I was like, I have to make a serious change in my life because this is not healthy. Like, I can't just be waking up, going to school, practicing, going home. That's not, no, I would rather be a worse pianist and have a better outside life and be okay with it than be one of the best pianists in the world and have no friends. Like that, it was so lonely, and especially for piano. I wasn't doing any ensemble work. I wasn't doing any because I was so obsessed with getting better. But at what expense? At my mental health, at my expense of my social life. Like I couldn't call one person after that breakup that wasn't a part of that. Like, oh, I don't have friends, so I'll just be a part of my cousin's friend group. And his friend, that's who I was dating. And um, when that breakup happened, I was like, I didn't make any of my own friends. And so I started within my studio. I started texting people in my studio, just hanging out, saying hi, like being more social. And then it kind of went from there, like just being comfortable saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to practice for 6 hours today. I'm going to go to that dinner, or I'm going to go to this event, or um, like being okay with, you know what? I might not get an hour of practice, like an extra hour of practicing in today, but I will be happier. And not to say that I'm constantly depressed when I'm practicing. No, like practicing shouldn't be like a chore, but there becomes a point with certain hours. Uh, is this even worth it, or are you just obsessing? And is it really going to do that much difference? And I realized it's not. And once I started living a better life, I felt like my piano went up. I started seeing a nutritionist that summer. I started training. I like completely did a 180. I started meditating. I started just having time outside of piano. I was cooking. I wasn't just eating out for every meal. And that was when like a light after a whole year of my master's degree, I thought it was the worst thing in the world. I was like, my life is over. I hate this degree. But it's because I wasn't living my life. I was just practicing an instrument with black and white keys that make noise, you know? And once I started living my life, I felt like I was actually playing music for like the first time in over a year. So
I think everybody just needs to go back and rewind that last part and over and over and over and over again, and put it on a t-shirt or something, put it on your friend's forehead. And because I firmly believe now, I didn't before my injury, but as the quality of your life goes up, your musicianship goes up like exponentially more than if you were just focusing on your musicianship. I had an interesting experience a couple of months ago as I've been trying to come back. One of the things that I was doing to go through, to get through my injury was to start learning jazz piano. And that was a huge learning curve for a guy who quit piano at 13 to focus on trumpet, right? But what I realized, I had a really interesting experience. And I took classes, at our school in jazz improvisation on piano, which was really frustrating because it wasn't my primary instrument. But when I came back and I started playing a little bit on trumpet, and jam sessions and things like that, I was able to do things, that on the trumpet, like from an improvisation standpoint, that I'd never been able to do before my injury. And I think it was because of that investment that I had taken outside of my trumpet, right? And then also just in the other areas of your life, if you invest in, the principal investment is you put a little in now or a lot in now, and you get a return on your investment later on that's hopefully greater than the amount that you put in, right? And that's the whole thing with, showing up for yourself and, taking these other aspects of your life and using them to recharge you and to create a better quality of life than if you were to just keep practicing, right? I think that's something that every single college musician needs to hear, regardless if they've been through an injury or not. Hear and apply. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes the injury to apply that, but hopefully this show will, change that. But
I wish that I would have been okay with just saying no to practicing, that my piano's not going to get worse, And I always felt so guilty, like, I should be practicing right now, I should be practicing. Because as musicians, it's not like other students where if engineering or economic or whatever student wanted to get all their homework done for that week within 3 days, they could. And then they could just chill the weekend and have
Right.
so much fun. With musicians, we can't. We can't just kind of cram all of our practicing in and then take off like 5 days, because the stuff we just practiced mentally is like not always there. Like it takes a lot of time. And so I would use that as like to kind of guilt trip me, being like, okay, well, I can't take Saturday off because I have a lesson Monday and I know my friends are doing this really fun thing, but it doesn't matter, you know? And so there's always some give and take. It's like, do I take the day off and risk whatever I worked on the day before not being 100% there? Or do I take the day off and then I have fun, but then I have to work extra hard the next day? And I think it's just like training your brain that it doesn't have to be practice room dependent, continue to get better. Because once I started out of the practice room practice and like training my brain to be able to retain that knowledge that I learned, and that it's not just, okay, I have to practice every single day. I was able to feel more confident in just saying yes to other opportunities that weren't music related, just for fun, and like not freaking out when I went on family vacations for a week and a half, and not because I knew that I had worked enough like mentally to understand that taking some days off, as long as I train outside of the practice room, like looking at my score when I can, or listening to my pieces, or being conscious of what I've learned, like writing down what I learned and remembering that, that I'm gonna be just fine. But it's not like it's just taking 5 days off, come back and be perfect. That's not gonna happen.
Right. No, and I think I believe there's been studies done that I've read about in certain classes and other forums where the reason why rest is so important, like sleep, is because our brain is processing the information that we have received, that it had basically taken in the day before, and you need that rest in order for it to complete that downloading, essentially, right? And so equally as important is you need to sleep as a musician, right? And then, but the rest, the time off of the horn or the piano, I guess, for you, to let your brain process that information, that the music that you just downloaded. And if you don't do that and you keep cramming stuff in, I mean, that's, your computer's going to crash, essentially, right? Your body computer's going to crash. And that's honestly one of the reasons why the name of my show is Trust the Process, right? And the logo is the show hasn't come out yet when we're recording this, but the logo is a music note with a plant growing in it, and you can't rush a plant growing, right? But as you trust that process, that okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, naturally the natural process is that I will improve. But sometimes as musicians, we just focus on the part of the process that's, I got to water it, I got to practice or whatever. But no, that also needs sunlight and good soil. And that soil is kind of like our entire life, right? So, I mean, we could just keep going down this rabbit hole for another hour, but this has just been awesome. I really, really enjoyed this. So just last two questions. You go back to last October, to Savannah from last year. And you have the opportunity to take away the injury, or not, or just to leave it there. Was it worth it enough for you to leave it there, or would you take it away?
It was worth it. I had to learn so many hard lessons, and I wish I didn't have to learn them that way. Like if I could go back knowing what I know now and still change it, I think I would. I think I would have contacted a technique professor. I would have said, hey, something like I can feel there's tension in my playing. I would like to fix it. But if I just had to go back to that moment, not knowing what I know now, I think I would have kept it. Just because it was very much a reality check. It was like, if you don't slow down, you're going to break. And I did. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah, we are very similar in that and that realization, that come to Jesus moment, right? And then my last question for you, Savannah, is there's many people who are going to be listening to this who are in the 6 months into their recovery, or even it happened yesterday, just very, very difficult time of their recovery, and they text you on Instagram. They said, hey, I listened to your conversation on Trust the Process, and I'm going through the same thing. I'm a pianist, and I'm doing this. So probably text you on Instagram. And what do you say to them? What would be your one piece of advice? Even if it's not a pianist, just general piece of advice for any musician going through injury.
If it happened yesterday, like immediately, like they just got injured, I think my biggest piece of advice would be go do something that makes you happy, like non-music related. Just remind yourself that you can feel the happy emotion. Like you are not fulfilled only through your music, and that there's so many other things that fulfill you. And if you can't think of anything, start a random hobby. You're like, you know what? I'm going to pick up pottery, or like painting, crocheting, like just do something that, like, find something else that fulfills you outside of music, and don't stress too much. And then once you're like, okay, you know what, I'm out of the panic phase, then I would like look at your music outside of the practice room and say, okay, what am I going to mentally practice for the next 10 minutes? What am I going to mentally do in the next 10 minutes? And just kind of pace yourself and say, okay, I can do 10 minutes of listening to an interpretation and seeing if I like this, or listening to a masterclass and writing down some notes for the future, things like that. But I think the first thing would be just do something immediately that like fulfills you and makes you happy. And you are not a bad musician if you don't want to feel sad. Like, I wish that I would have done that. I wish that I wouldn't have felt sad. And I wish I would have said, you know what? I don't have to feel sad to prove that I'm injured. Like I can go have fun, and that doesn't mean that I'm not taking it seriously. So that would be.
Yeah, I'm going to chew on that last part, because that's something the last thing I think we want is in these situations is pity, right? And sometimes we forget that, no, you definitely need to feel those emotions, but not to let them drive the bus, right?
Yeah.
So that's such an important thing. There's so many more things I wish we had time to talk about, but maybe there's will be a part 2 about this, or with you later on in the future.
I would love to.
So thank you so much for your time today, Savannah. I really, really enjoyed getting to know you and your situation. I really believe it's going to help a lot of people, especially people our age, and in the same situations. A lot of things we talked about are not just pianist related or trumpet related, and that's my hope. So for the rest of you listening in podcast land, thanks for joining us for another episode of Trust the Process. And so please share this with somebody you know going through injury, or your professors, your educators, everybody in your life that you feel like would benefit from this. And until next time, keep trusting the process. Bye.
Thanks for listening into our conversation today. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. To see a full bio for our guest today, see the show notes or go to our website at trusttheprocesspodcast.com. Make sure you share this with a musician you care about who's going through injury, or a music educator in your life, or anyone just trying to make it in life. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com, or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Before we go, I just want to give a heartfelt thank you and shout out to my team, Daniel Baldwin, who is my audio engineer, Kevin West, who does all music and sound effects for the show, and my sister Dana Lovell, who created the logo and promotional materials. We wouldn't have this show without them. So tune in next time for another episode of Trust the Process.